probably we need to get near and cover our Secretary General of the Patriotic Front, Honorable Raphael Nakacinda. While we're preparing for this podcast, we have just received very, very sad news. A fatal accident near Lubushi, near Kasama, this evening has sadly claimed the lives of the two brothers to Honorable Chimbakambwili. Honorable Chimbakambwili was traveling to Kasama for his court case that is due tomorrow on Wednesday, 16th October 2024. The information so far is that Honorable Chimbakambwili, the driver, and his lawyer are admitted to Munkonge Mini Hospital, and they are being attended to. They require immediate medical attention. Our prayers and hopes are with the Kambwilis, and we pray for his safety and recovery. Some of our officials from Kasama have rushed to Munkonge Mini Hospital, which is just outside Kasama, and we will update you if we receive anything. But sadly, Honorable Chimbakambwili has lost two of his brothers, Mr. Mtale Kambwili and Mr. Mwamba Kambwili. These have been confirmed. Honorable Kambwili is still not well. The assessment is being done by the doctors. Honorable Raphael Nakacinda, welcome to today's podcast.
Well, thank you very much, Your Excellency and Ambassador Emmanuel Mwamba. It's very unfortunate that as we begin this conversation, we have to also be dealing with this very devastating development. We wish our comrade and friend and brother, Honorable Kambwili, God's gracious blessing to have him recover and survive. Yeah. It's very unfortunate that we have lost two lives, and obviously it's not an easy experience or development, for the Kambwili family, the Patriotic Front family, and obviously Zambian people to stomach the reality of having lost two brothers to Honorable Kambwili. But obviously it's a developing situation. We are here to get more details of what unfolds. We pray that the three that have been reported to have survived, that they don't only survive but also recover.
Thank you very much. So that's the start of our conversation podcast. It has started on a sad note. We just received messages just this evening, just before the podcast, that Honorable Chimbakambwili was involved in a fatal accident. He himself has survived, his driver and his lawyer. Unfortunately, his two brothers have died. The accident happened near Lubushi when you are coming into Kasama, and the three are admitted at Munkonge Mini Hospital, which is just at Lubusha there. Having dealt with that, and we'll keep on updating you as we receive more information. Honorable Nakacinda, you are a national feature in our country. A lot of people have known your vocal and fundamental statements that you usually use, but they don't know who Honorable Raphael Nakacinda is. Just briefly, tell us about your early life.
Well, maybe I've always assumed that my political journey and exposure as a public, open individual, my life is out there for everybody to see. But the fact that you're asking that question on behalf of others, I'm compelled to briefly talk about myself, which is really a very rare phenomenon. Nakacinda is basically, Raphael is a simple Zambian whose political journey spans up to about 25, almost 27 years in terms of direct involvement. I have multifaceted, aspects of my life, but I think it would be more beneficial to Zambian people because we're discussing our political discourse for me to give a summary introduction of who I am and what I've been involved in. In the mid-80s, as a young boy, I was privileged because my father happened to have been friends to a Mr. Judah Mnangagwa, who was elder brother to Mr. Emerson Mnangagwa, or Dr. Emerson Mnangagwa now, who's president of Zimbabwe. By that time, he was basically just among government officials. I think he was a minister of state or security. My father was an educationist, and he happened to have been head teacher for a school in Mumba, rural. And because of his friendship with Mr. Judah Mnangagwa, they ventured into farming activities together. So Mr. Judah Mnangagwa offered my father a piece of land that over and above his teaching career.
Many people know that the Mnangagwas were in Mumba. You seem to have had a close relationship or contacts. Just tell us about the Mnangagwas in Mumba.
Yeah, I mean, the larger family of the Mnangagwas had moved into Zambia many years before Zimbabwe attained its independence. Actually, before Zambia, Mr. Emerson Mnangagwa happened to have been among those that were members of the ANC. And because remember that the ANC that was established through traditional leaders many years before the 1950s, 1960s, Chief or the Ritunga then, Lewanika and others, or before Lewanika actually, the Ritunga then, and the Chief Albert Rituli and others got involved in the establishment of a political movement because they felt that they were excluded from the then what was established as a parliament to determine the governance system of not only South Africa but obviously the SADC region, because the borders had not yet been properly defined. But fast forward, Zambia had attained its independence. Zimbabwe was still fighting for independence, but as a young person, I happened to have been privileged to encounter Dr. Emerson Mnangagwa, like I indicated, when Zimbabwe had just freshly attained its independence and that formed government. So, as a young kid, I was exposed. I think he had interest to start, to groom or infuse political education to those that he encountered. Maybe out of the mere fact that they were still overwhelmed with the excitement of the fact that they had attained independence. So I was exposed to political education about South Africa, about Africa, about all that. You bring materials. And I happen to have an affinity towards driving and cars. And they used to come with very interesting, different versions of vehicles. And so I would shift whenever he was around, maybe for 2-3 weeks, to the Mnangagwas as a young boy. My parents would try and whip me to try and say, can you behave? Until they just gave in and said, okay, this is, your son. Whenever you come, please, have him. And that's how I got exposed. And towards 1889, of course, Zambia also began to, engage into some political activism with a demand for multi-party democracy. I was just about to graduate from primary school into secondary school. By 1990-91, as young boys or teenagers or just graduating into our teens, we're now being recruited, and the prominent person that came into my life happened to have been Mr. Stanford Plaza, who was attempting to stand, because I then was to go to Mumba Secondary School. That's how he was, I think, attempting to stand as a member of parliament for Mumba. That's how some of us who, as young people, seem to have had some knowledge of political activism and all that, and were interested with what's going on. He adopted us. He got some musical team, I think it was the Burning Youth or something that time, and got us involved in some activities. So that's how...
Oh, for his campaign?
For his campaign. Actually, before his campaign, it was basically agitating for the movement for multi-party democracy, wanting that, the country would force the then government, the UNIP government, to agree to go to a referendum so the constitution can change to introduce multi-party democracy. That's how we ended up getting involved. But because we were in school and we were young, so it would be used for just errands here and there.
Yeah.
But obviously we're interested and curious about what is this all about. Now, fast forward, MMD formed government, and everything settled. The activism, obviously settled. And Mr. Slazo was a member of parliament. Government was formed in 1993. 1993, Mr. Stanford Slazo, who happened to have been among those who had recruited us, started agitating, some kind of dissatisfaction against MMD.
Yeah.
So that's when, again, we were reactivated. But, even when I was young, I did not agree, because I think it was too soon to have dissent and to have people wanting to rebel. And the conversations and discussions did not really, make sense. So we disagreed with Mr. Slazo, but he happened to have joined others who formed that time National Party, led, I think, by Honorable Mwamba, at that time. And
for our dear listeners, when the MMD formed government, in 1991, I think within a year or so, there was that fracture, big fracture. So the big guns, Emmanuel Kasonde, Humphrey Mulemba, Baldwin Nkumbula decided, Akashamba Twambikusta, Leonica and others decided to break, and people like Lazo also, decided to break away, and they formed the National Party, and there were various by-elections, because some were parliamentarians.
So fast forward, of course, then my parents were very strong. I think my political engagements were also becoming disruptive to our school, so there was a bit of whipping that I focused on school. But by 1995, 1996, we got reactivated to get involved, and that's when I decided to directly get involved and be a member, recognized member of the movement for multi-party democracy as a young person. And interestingly, Dr. Chiluba had this affinity towards young people. And I was one of those that were privileged to have been recognized at a tender age. And it so happened that his memory was so sharp that one time I came to Lusaka for holidays, and out of just adventure, I had decided to go to the airport to go and see this president that inspired everybody to participate in a movement for change. And then he was such an oratory leader. He dressed well. He was just, there was some, aura around him. So I said, no, I don't want to be watching at a distance. These are people that adopted us like their kids and sent us for errands. So I decided to go to the airport to go and see whether I can have a chance to say hi. So I went to, our international airport at the time. He was traveling out of the country. And we tried to push and get ourselves to navigate through the queues as he would traditionally greet everybody before he alights his plane and travel out. So there were cadres, they pushed everybody around, but somehow because I was looking young and they seemed to have been zealous, all the cadres just favored me and said, no, please allow him, let him just greet the president. And even me, I never imagined that President Chiluba would actually remember this kid. So I get on the queue, he was coming, greeting everybody, and so on. And when he got to me, he says, son, where have you been? So then I said, we've been around, school and whatever. But I would love to see you. Okay, when I get back, I want to see you. And he moved on. Now, I remained puzzled, thinking, he wants to see me, where am I going to see him? Where am I going to find him? Not knowing that the president is such a unique office and institution that the very wish of the president to say that I want to see you was a directive.
Yeah, people would look for you. So
immediately, the people came to me and said, what's your name? There were no cell phones at the time. Okay, there were cell phones, maybe just for a few people, but I didn't have a cell phone or anything like that. What's your name? I tell him, where are you from? I'm staying in Helen Kaunda at the time. So he says, okay, here is a card, go to Pamozi Hotel. When you get there, just introduce yourself. You stay there until the president comes back.
Wow.
That's how my political journey started. So I got to Pamozi Hotel and got a card. When I got to the reception and they saw the card, everybody just started running, without explaining. And in no time, a card for my room and everything. There is somebody obscure that I think saved me out of the excitement that gripped me, having been taken in a 5-star hotel and at the courtesy of the president. So in one evening, that very evening, the first day when we got there, Mr. Kaoma, they used to call him a nickname as, I'll remember that.
Yes.
So he then, I think, also had come from the Copperbelt to see the president, and they had been hosted at Pamozi Hotel. So he saw me getting a little excited. I have my cousin and other people, coming, and I'm just saying, here's a card, order food, order drinks, and all that. So he pulls me on the side and says, my son, I know that you're here courtesy of the president, but I want to give you advice. You may think that this is just an innocent courtesy. The president obviously has plans or ideas on what he would want to do with you. I think you better behave yourself. Do you have any money on you? I said, I don't have. And he says, I would advise that you don't order, drinks, food outside yourself. But if you want to go and entertain your friends, I'll give you money. And he produced some money and gave me.
Oh, wow.
And go and entertain your friends at, there used to be a place called Nook, it used to be called Nook at Playhouse.
Yeah.
So go and have drinks or whatever it is. So I obliged. When President Chiluba came back, I think after 2-3 days, around 6 o'clock, a phone call came and said, get ready, 7 o'clock, we're meeting the president. So when we got to State House, or I got to State House, and there were other people, the president honored me with a welcome, actually with a hug.
Wow.
And then he says, come in. I'm amazed. You are such a young boy, but you're so responsible. I was looking at the view at the hotel I was expecting. I was expecting a huge bill.
Yes.
I see all the people put him in the hotel. Wow. The bill. Were you not eating? I didn't disclose that there was some angel that was sent in Mr. Kaoma who guided me how to conduct myself.
Yeah.
That was the beginning of a closer relationship and working relationship with Dr. Chiluba. Immediately asked me, what are you doing? What are your qualifications? I said, well, I'm about just to get into tertiary education, but I'm more inclined into doing business. I'm not looking for a job, but I can work for myself. So that's when he started, attempting to facilitate for me to engage into business. And obviously the first thing, because I was because of my love and passion for vehicles, I was more inclined into import and export of vehicles. And quickly he advised that you need to get some skills. So I went and trained, into freight, into freight and forwarding business.
Yeah.
And I got a diploma in that, basically for me to be able to manage my business. So that's how I got involved in business. But on the sideline, the main assignment or role I was playing was political activities, mobilizing students, mobilizing the youths, and so on. Fast forward, 2001, from 1998 to 99, there was an agitation for a third term. And that's how somehow we seem to have a strained relationship with Dr. Chiluba. I was among the young people that did not agree with the push for the third term. I remember State Council Eric Swamba at that time, I think was minister in the office of the president.
He was Presidential Affairs Minister.
Yeah, and then Honorable Vijay Mwanga, who had identified that as young as we were, somehow had the courage to be able to tell the president things as they were. So they approached me and said, I think we need to come and have a conversation. And right there, they asked me what my position was in relation to, the third term. And I was very clear that I did not support.
Yeah.
So I said, no, I think it's important that you sit with your father. Because we have tried to advise and guide, but it looks like it's a bit of a difficult feat to achieve. So I organized friends, user students and others to come and meet, Dr. Chiluba, and he was gracious to accept to meet us. So we ended up accusing Mr. Sata at the time that he was misleading him, pushing the third term agenda for his selfish interests, and that it is destroying his legacy. When we finished the presentation, Dr. Chiluba was so upset that the manner in which we presented is like we have no respect and so on. He left the meeting. And then after about an hour, we were left. We were not told whether we are leaving or we have to stay. After an hour, lo and behold, somebody came to the boardroom at State House, so I think it's the room where cabinet meetings are sometimes held, and we're told the president wants you in his office. When we got in his office, he shouts as they knocked. Somebody knocks, then he shouts, "Come in, let them come in." So we got there, then he shouts, "Sit down." And we looked around, there were no chairs in the office. So we realized, I think our fate is to just go on the ground and sit on the ground. Then before long, we just smelled a cigar. So the person we were accusing of misleading the president in the name of Michael Sata had just been invited by the president to come. So then Mr. Sata walks in, and all of us now, we were wanting to pee. Others are because we knew that now trouble has come. And Chiluba says, hey, you are telling me something, can you repeat? You can't be accusing my national secretary. What were you saying? So we knew that our fate here is that whatever we say, we're already done.
Yeah.
So the best is to gather courage to say what we said so that when we are sorted out, at least we try to say.
Yeah.
So I repeated what my friends had asked me to say. And I think we earned Dr. Chiluba's respect. We were dismissed on a moment, Michael Sata expelled us, suspended us, expelled us. And that's, I think, at some point, the excuse that got me to start associating with people like Nevasmo, because he had just been launching a political party and so on. But I think there are many things we can talk about. I mean, my journey in politics spans up to about 25, 27 years. I think there are more details to this. But that's a brief I can give you in terms of the introduction of Nakacinda on the political scene. Fast forward.
You are known in many circles as a pastor. Tell us about that journey.
Well, I think at the time that, first of all, I'm a Christian, I'm a believer, and I associated with politically in the later years with Dr. Mumba. But outside business, I was quite strong with philanthropic activities. I was so lucky that at the initial stage when Japan began to offload second-hand vehicles in Africa before the market was as flooded as it is today, we were the first few. Among them, I can remember, is it Dick Masevo? There used to be another gentleman called Dimsariri who started going to Japan to order vehicles. And I opened a junkyard in Japan as a little boy. And when we opened a junkyard in Japan, vehicles were as cheap as $100, $200, $300. So I got a little bit too excited that before I could learn how to run at my stage of crawling, I wanted to start behaving as if I'm strong enough to run. Yeah. So I launched a wing of my business where I would support churches, pastors and others with transport on hire purchase. So the churches would come and negotiate that they want to buy a vehicle for the church or for their pastor, and they'll pay maybe 20–30% of the value of the vehicle, then they'll pay in installments. It landed me in trouble, but that's how I began to mingle among some of the pastors and bishops that I can't mention. Yeah. But along the way, I ended up having a number of them owing Maditu Enterprise money. And because I was mingling in that circle, all of a sudden I earned myself the title of pastor, and it brought with it some prestige. So I couldn't deny. And along the way, I met a wonderful gentleman in the name of Reverend Andrew Mwenda, who took keen interest to basically take me in like a son, to mentor me and try and guide around issues of all the activities that I was doing, philanthropic and otherwise, and once in a while help in church activities and so on and so forth. And as a layperson, I would then be assigned to do one work or the other. And then coupled with the fact that on the public scene, I would then associate later with Dr. Mumba. So it just... That's another part. A lot of people know you playing some prominent role in the life of Dr. Mumba. I think after he left the office of vice president. Just tell us that particular journey with Dr. Mumba. I think... How did you meet him? Like I said, I met him, first of all, after falling out of favor with Dr. Chiluba briefly, okay, over the third term. But when Dr. Chiluba then realized that we were right, and he decided to terminate the, campaign for his third term, he was, I think, generous to reach out to some of us who had been forthright to him that is not right. And among them was myself, or at least ourselves with the colleagues that were part of that conversation. So he reached out to us. But that time, we had been supporting Dr. Mumba, Nevas Mumba, at a distance, because my attraction to Dr. Nevas Mumba was basically as a result of the fact that President Chiluba had professed to be a Christian.
Yeah.
And consistently having declared Zambia a Christian nation and so on. I think he had been supportive to the church. He even had what is to be called the slush fund, where churches were being empowered and so on. So when he then went for the third term, and sorry to say, there were also personal issues around his marriage and things like that that began to, challenge us around issues of supporting him, not only as a president, but a president who was a believer.
Yeah.
So we then began to think that Dr. Nevas Mumba seemed to have been one that fitted the mold. And because he was a reverend, we felt that he was even more stronger. He would not fall or be tempted the way the one who was just a believer would be. Yeah. So that's how eventually the attraction, to him came. But that was short-lived, because then Dr. Chiluba reached out and asked us to support a new candidate. And that's how we introduced Mwanawasa to ourselves. And I was deployed because at family level, apparently Mwanawasa's family, we had some family connections. Moses Muteteka, who happened to have been his
private secretary.
Before then, he had married the niece to Madam Maureen Mwanawasa. His two young brothers or cousins, Paul Mwanawasa and another one, though Paul Mwanawasa was a bit on the younger side, but another one, his brothers, came to Mumba Secondary School in the 1992-93. And one of them actually died in my cubicle because he was electrocuted. So that brought the family a little bit closer. And Dr. Chiluba came to learn those sad incidences. So when President Manaus was nominated or adopted as a candidate, we were assigned to support his candidature. And then eventually he won. And in 2001, after President Manaus had won, Dr. Chiluba's idea was that then we'll be deployed to work at State House to support President Mwanawasa. So at that time there was Alfred Chupoya, who was Mwanawasa had picked from his law firm. I think he was one of the clerks or something. Then his son-in-law or something like that, Moses Mteteka, I was one of them, and a few others. But before we could formally then be put in positions, conversations began to emerge within State House and Quasi because of proximity, to the effect that there was discomfort about President Chiluba maintaining the position of president of MMD, whilst Dr. Mwanawasa was president of the Republic of Zambia, and obviously having been candidate of MMD. And then also issues of corruption and so on. And you could get lines that suggested that there would be a removal of the immunity of President Chiluba. And maybe out of youthful arrogance, I expressed myself disagreeing with President, with the approach, and I thought it was going to divide the nation, and that yes, President Chiluba, if his stance was to remain president and try and control President Chiluba, I think it wasn't right. But again, to go and fight him, I felt it wasn't right. And having expressed myself, and ceremoniously I was kicked out of State House. And that's how I found myself, fast forward a year or two, I think we found ourselves together trying to fight and defend President Chiluba, whose immunity was lifted, and there were hundreds of allegations against him, which I think when we sat with President Chiluba, he consistently said they were false and so on, and it was proved right because out of the many allegations presented in Parliament by President Mwanawasa, only about, is it 4 or 6, saw the light of day in court to a value of about $500,000 at the time. And he eventually later, you know what we went through, eventually he was acquitted. But President Chiluba has died, covered in the blanket of propaganda that he was a thief, he was corrupt. My view and position is that if there was a man that conducted himself as president in an exemplary manner, was Dr. Chiluba. Because when it comes to whether it is his personal money, money for campaigns, or any funds that came to him from friends and whatever, it was all subjected to a vetting process. That's how come the money was found in the Zamtrup account, managed by the office of the president, the OP, as you call it. He never received money, Dr. Chiluba, at least from what I know, from individuals' hands. That's how come Dr. Chiluba, as president, could fire anybody. He could fire his vice president looking at them in their face because he was never compromised. He could fire his ministers. But of course, he was also open about the fact that as president, people bring gifts, but those gifts have to be vetted by the OP, and he was strong about not wanting ever to receive blood money, whatever it meant. He also didn't want to receive drug money, whatever it meant. And at the time he was leaving office, he was preparing to have some venture in retirement. And I think he had attempted to establish a democratic institute. Yeah. And I think what we now call Acacia Park was was one of the places designated for him to be able to build and put up an institution in which they can mentor and train people in democracy, political science, and all that. That was, I think, his vision he kept on repeating. But because of the removal of immunity and the fight and the propaganda and so on, even that place was eventually dented. The money that had been given to him, whether it's by Gaddafi and others for that purpose in his retirement, eventually everybody started suggesting it was stolen and all that. Fast forward, I think outside just fighting for the innocence of Dr. Chiluba, and the forces were strong because it wasn't just local propaganda. Yeah. There were international organizations and institutions. I can disclose that when he was in office towards the end, there was an overture from what now is an advisory unit of Tony Blair. But the Tony Blair family, through institutions that were associated with them, proposing to Dr. Chiluba that they wanted him to privatize ZESCO. And Dr. Chiluba refused. And many other interest areas that they wanted to engage in terms of their business interests here. He refused. And because he refused, then the propaganda machinery was then put in place to attack him. The mistake Dr. Chiluba made was to succumb to those who presented an idea that he can go for the third term. Because the third term campaign became an opportunity for those who were fighting him to suggest that he had something to hide. But I can confidently tell you that Dr. Chiluba, up to today, I can challenge anybody. We can go and still audit and scrutinize, issues in relation to his presidency and the money he had. It was obtained in a transparent manner. When I was privileged to have been nominated member of Parliament, Ambassador Mwamba, I went to Parliament to move a motion for restitution because I felt Dr. Chiluba was mistreated and was not treated properly. And the so-called campaign and fight against corruption was ill-conceived. It actually just went towards benefiting individuals. Some of them ended up even started running airlines and so on. Of course, it's a subject for another day. But I think they benefited from the so-called fight against, corruption. I even went to challenge President Edgar Chagalunga at the time, because that's when I had the opportunity to be in Parliament, to ask him whether or not he would want to take keen interest in the affairs of the Chiluba family. and look at all these issues. I went to DPP at the time, Lydian Siuni, to tell me whether, as an office, they found the Chiluba and some of the cases associated with Chiluba really were justified for them to end up in the manner that ended up. Xavier Chungu and others. And the DPP at the time says, it's just that as it were, this all is commingled, but Chiluba was innocent, and we need to restitute. I attempted to move a motion. It's just that, unfortunately, as it were, people may, like you're saying, we're too blunt in our discourse politically, because I don't see and I don't know any other way but to say things as they are.
Yeah.
It's just that I found that there was a roadblock at Parliament because our good speaker, Dr. Matibini, was also conflicted. He was one of the lawyers that were prosecuting Dr. Chiluba in London. And remember the London judgment, they are attempting to register in Zambia. So when I moved the motion, and it was to be cleared by the speaker was reluctant to have it passed. That's how come I went to the president. And I still believe strongly that President Edgar Chagalungu, had he moved boldly, I know he was willing, but had he moved boldly to be able to correct that mistake and restitute, not only restitute for Dr. Chiluba, but all former presidents, I don't think Dr. Edgar Chagalungu will be going through what he's going through. The mistake that we have today is that the cycle has continued. Even what Hakainde Hichilema is subjecting President Edgar Chagalungu to, I can tell you, he's feeding into that same cycle. You face the same fate because you have not been able to correct that cycle. And
a brief background about the mistreatment that occurs in politics. President Kaunda jailed Dr. Chiluba in 1980 because there was a coup and President Frederick Chiluba was president of the Zambia Congress of Trade Union. And at the time, they thought there was a broader plan for the coup, that there will be instability through maybe workers' strikes and workers' protests. So they and his colleagues, President Chiluba was locked up in Livingstone, New State Zimba. They were separated. About 8 of the major leaders of the Congress were locked up. Fast forward 10 years later, Dr. Kaunda is president, and towards the election of 1991, there is huge propaganda that President Kaunda stole $4 billion. And in fact, people profess that they knew where that $4 billion was. And if the amount was being stated by Michael Sata, who had just walked out of Kaunda's government, there was belief that there was credibility to that. And then you see the harassment around Dr. Kaunda. Again, people asked, is it revenge for the area locking up of the former president, President Frederick Chiluba, then as a trade unionist? And then we saw it heighten when Dr. Kaunda tried to stand in 1996, trying to return to politics. We saw that campaign very heightened against Dr. Kaunda. Fast forward, like you said, President Mwanawasa is president. And then he embarks on this very, very strong campaign against his predecessor, using the object of corruption, that President Frederick Chiluba was corrupt, and that cycle has not ended. When you look back, like you are asking yourself, was the fight against Chiluba merited? Was it justified? Of all the huge charges that were brought into Parliament, how come they never ended up in court, but they had damaged his name through the propaganda, like you are saying? This cycle repeated itself when President Michael Sata became president. Rupiah Banda was subjected to the similar humiliation. I wish that there could be a cleaner way. Maybe you do an audit, you find out where the money was allegedly stolen before you embark on these campaigns against the former president. And what President Edgar Lungu is going through again is the same cycle. The bulk of it is just propaganda. We saw it under Dr. Chiluba. We saw it when it affected Rupiah Banda, and now we can see it. I don't know at what stage our country will reconcile this matter of former presidents. I don't know what your views are. Some have suggested, do we need a Truth and Reconciliation Commission? Do we need dialogue about this matter? What should we do? Others say, are we allowing impunity by, for example, leaving former presidents alone, not persecuting or pursuing what the allegations could be? Just answer to those issues.
Well, I think the opportunity was lost in President Edgar Chagwa. We hope it can be restored, because his attitude towards President Kaunda was exemplary. The persecution of President Rupiah Banda was halted and stopped under his watch as president. And I think President Rupiah Banda was, treated, and of course other people may argue that it was because we supported him in the 2015 presidential by-election. Whether that was the motivation or not, it presented an opportunity to break that cycle. But I think there wasn't really a move to get to others who eventually, like Chiluba, died without restitution. The children today are being reported, one of them served a jail sentence, purely because even when the father served this country as president for 10 years, they're impoverished. Nobody's talking about Mama Vera today and asking what her welfare is. What kind of country are we? Look at Madam Maureen Manawasa. There's mystery around how, first of all, her journey after the husband died, and then eventually her retirement package and all those things, and then later on the country is surprised that she even suffered some cancerous situation. Government didn't really pronounce. She died, and she was in some rented house and all that. And I think as a country we need to reflect on those issues. So my position is that we need just some bold step, because we run a presidential system. I know that people like yourselves and others emphasize mainly on systems and institutions of government being able to protect and whatever. Those systems apparently deliberately have never been strengthened and put in place because it saves the interests of individuals. Today, our democracy is under threat because we are unfortunate to have a dictator as president. Under Edgar Chagwa, we're lucky to have somebody who, even when he was inclined to push, personal political interest, he always, whipped himself and corrected himself, towards respecting the rule of law. I can just imagine if it was Hichilema who had decided, for example, to maintain ministers, because there's a provision of the Constitution which suggests that ministers will not be dissolved until after the change of government. Because the current Constitution of 2016, initially the draft was envisioning having ministers appointed outside Parliament. But when there was a change of mind because of inadequacies in terms of infrastructure and so on, the document was not thoroughly cleaned. So that provision remained. And then President Lungu said, well, the provision says that ministers will still be maintained. When the Constitutional Court ruled against him, he didn't argue. He didn't fight the judiciary. He didn't fire, judges. But I can assure you, if it was Hichilema in office, he would have threatened judges. He would have gone to them in wanting them to maintain his wish and desire. That is what is happening today. So I think what we need is to, as a country, move away from subjecting ourselves to the benevolence of individuals, in this case, those who occupy the office of president. The moment you have a minister there, like we are noticing today, everything collapses. For the first time in the history of this country, we are having, in 60 years, a budget a national budget presented by, the finance minister, Dr. Msogotwane, being discussed in camera. When I say in camera, secretly, not on the floor of Parliament. They have decided to have members of Parliament put in committees to discuss the budget sector by sector. So if my MP, either for Kafiwe or indeed Mandevu or Lusaka Central, where I'm represented, if they are in the committee to do with agriculture, they are restricted to discuss this budget only to do with agriculture. How does the agriculture sector affect people in Ngombe, affect people in Kablonga? Because these are not farmers. You expect that these people in this constituency would have their member of parliament speak to the budget in the area that affects them. But if you restrict members of parliament to discuss the budget in committees, sector by sector, you have deprived the representative of the people to speak to the budget in totality. But how have we ended up here? Is because we are all succumbing to the benevolence of an individual. Today, the principle of providing checks and balances has been compromised, because we have in government a president and his government who want to prescribe to you and me how we should provide checks and balances. They are abusing the law to do with seditious practices to gag and stop people from speaking out. How many times have I been called to the police? Over 30 times. How many times have I been arrested and even detained? Numerous times. Just last week or 2 weeks ago, for basically just exposing the fact that there were plans to go and raid the former president's residence. This is information that was first published on the platform or online page of the mass newspaper. That, President Lungu's home to be raided by DEC, SEC, and the police. And as Secretary General, have a responsibility. This is our party president, to speak for him, for the party. What happens to President Lungu affects the party, affects the nation, and therefore Zambians deserve to know what is going on. When I tried to verify and it suggested it was from credible sources, I decided to, at 23:30 or so, have a press briefing, just to expose the fact that we are aware of what the intentions of this government and the police is towards President Lungu. And that we are going to provide solidarity. And all the roads lead to Chifuema, so that we can give him support as they do whatever they want to do, at midnight. There are other protocols that are expected to be observed if they were genuinely wanting to do a search. They get a warrant, they serve a warrant on the victim, in this case, if he's a former president, and they go in broad daylight and do a search. But for them to start planning to go at midnight, we knew that there were other issues to do with eligibility and so on, and we spoke to it. Then they arrest you and say seditious practice. In what form? I actually laugh. Hichilema pretends and he presents himself as this strong politician who is thick-skinned. He's a wimp. He's a coward. He actually has proven to be a president who has a spaghetti, spine, who can't stand just simple criticism of the fact that he's attempting to send police to whatever. Mwanawasa, he actually faced the highest form of opposition in terms of checks and balances and criticism in Maikosad. But he went to the Zambian people and said, I am not cabbage, I am steak, I have a thick skin, I will stand all manner of heat that will come from the opposition. Not Hichilema. He's a wimp, he's a coward, he's weak. And that's how come the only weapon he has is to use police, and even the police itself is not confident enough to have professional police put in offices. He has ended up creating a tribal cabal within the police. That's how come you find that those who speak more over what we say are actually tribesmen. And one of the greatest abomination I've committed, Ambassador Mwamba, is that I am Tonga speaking myself from the same village with him, and therefore it's an abomination to actually criticize him. Those who are in government and speak the same language and come from the same village with Aka and Hichilema, they consider this government their government. That is nonsensical. Those who are in the civil service are supposed to serve the government of the day with loyalty and so on, but never to get emotionally attached either on tribal lines or otherwise. You don't even expect those who are...
If Honorable Nakacinda, you are from the same village in Namwala with the president, do you at any time feel obliged that you support him because of that tribe? Do you have family or political pressure that you ought to belong to the UPND because the president comes from the same village as you?
Yes. I have had a situation where at a memorial service in the village of my father, the entire family coming to sit with me and tell me, Udumana Yesu, tuliyowe dotu, jimini ngajaji tikagulindwe, oyengu bururu wagoe, waratongo gabantu kuti, watiani ulamu, you are not giving him peace. Why don't you help him to govern? And I would ask them, I am in the opposition. Am I obliged just because I speak Tonga to support him? Am I obliged to support all the wrong things that he has done? The appointments he has made connotes and speak to the fact that this guy is a tribalist. I have opposed President Rupia Banda at a time that he seems to have made appointments that suggested they were tribally inclined. I opposed President Michael Sata when he made decisions that suggested that they were motivated by tribal inclination. Tribalism is wrong whether it is from an Easterner, from a Bemba, or a Tonga. And I can tell you, Mr. Aka Hichilema, 60 years down the line, he has taken us backwards. Look at the appointments at all levels. All, leaders of all the security wings are only from the Zambezi region. When you speak against that, that is a seditious practice. But you are speaking to facts. Now, in the police service, there's even tension between the Tonga speaking and the Loze speaking and the Northwesterners within the Zambezi region. Because when tribalism begins to get to mature, it begins to degenerate. First, you discriminate against regions. Next thing, you begin to discriminate against tribe. Next thing, you begin to discriminate against clans. I can tell you at some point it will degenerate to a point where even among the Tonga-speaking people will start selecting Varaganana Jirambani, Vaganana Wembali, because we are reducing until it gets to a point where it graduates into nepotism. You start now looking at who your relatives are. That is where Mr. Aka Hichilema is going. And those of us who are speaking against that trend, we may not be popular today, but I can tell you when this degenerates into what happened in Rwanda, that's when people say Nakacinda spoke. And I say to us Zambians, we must stop trivializing serious issues. The ugly head of tribalism has manifested in full-blown under Aka Hichilema. But everybody has decided to hide in their corner. They are affected, but they can't speak. Because
no, it is very simple. First of all, President Aka Hichilema has literally banned discussion on tribe and tribal talk. You have the Cyber Security and Cyber Crimes Act of 2021, and it has provisions about hate speech. That provision on hate speech, the police can find anything and classify it as tribal talk or hate speech. Number two, he doesn't want criticism about exactly what you are exposing. Because I think he doesn't just want a talk. He went to Parliament, he says that talk is divisive. He says you are dividing the country. He doesn't want those issues discussed in the name of national unity, in the name of tribalism. And he says the PF, you like tribal talk. What is your answer?
The person, if there's a person who's on record consistently, and a political party that is on record consistently using reverse tribalism, is a UPND. Even when Mr. Hichilema's ascension to the presidency of UPND was based on the recommendation that a Tonga should take over because a Tonga was president of UPND, they still had the courage to face the Zambians, whether it was in Parliament or everywhere, complaining on a daily basis, suggesting that in this country, the Tonga-speaking people have been discriminated against, which is not true. One of the prominent leaders in the liberation struggle, who was supported by all regions in this country, was Nkumbula, our grandfather, or our uncle. He was supported by the Kaundas, was supported by the Kapwepwes, was supported by the Wanikas and all those after Lewanika became Litunga. It was because the zeal and political activism towards attaining independence had slowed down, and he began to entertain the idea that we can delay even this process, that those who were agitated that it must happen now said, no, we can't go with the old man's pace. It had nothing to do with tribe. Okay? When, the people who formed the UNIP, it wasn't Kaunda. The people who formed the UNIP are Mainza Chona and others. Mainza Chona was a lawyer. He was one of those who even registered. And Mainza Chona is one of those who proposed in their meeting that none of us can lead this movement. We need to wait for Kaunda, who's charismatic, who was arrested in Zambezi at the time. For us to understand what is going on now, we need to study history. And as a political scientist, because my study, for some of the people that may not know, is that when I had the opportunity to do business, and it was international, import and export, I had to study, freight and forwarding business, because that's what, I was doing. When I got directly into politics and I needed to, push a political agenda, I had to go and study political science. When I moved to do philanthropic activities and so on, I had to study something to do with religion and church management and charity and all those things. Later on, when I got into Parliament, I had to study law, and I'm still a student of law at this particular stage, because obviously I was subjected to a process of formulating laws and so on. I'm just saying this to also say that if you are to really be a leader with your sword, one of the reasons why I appreciate your discourse is because you combine historical perspective to things and the current situation for you to project where we're going. If we don't study where we're coming from, you will think that the nonsense happening today is justifiable. If there is a region and tribe that has held strategic positions in this country from independence, is the Tonga-speaking people. We're able to produce a vice president, produce prime ministers. In the Zambezi region, we have produced more people at those levels. The only position that was never occupied until now with Hichilema was presidents. And being president is you can't make it as if it is it's the only thing. I mean, positions are just a means to the end. They are not the ultimate. The reason why we have a problem with Mr. Hichilema is because he aspired to become president as if being president is an achievement. And that is where the problem is. We must be inspired as political leaders to be change agents.
Yeah, the critics, Honorable Nakacinda, sometimes feel that you are personal with Hichilema. What are the challenges that you have with his leadership?
Maybe the deficits I have around that is that I came to know him, you understand, and what he was capable of doing. And when I discounted him, it sounds as if it's personal, because I warned the Zambian people he will not take us anywhere. I had the privileges of encountering President Hakainde Hichilema in opposition.
Tell us about that. When did you meet him in opposition?
In opposition, we met many years ago. Among the period was at a time that was ascending to the presidents of UPND. The greatest disappointment I had was for him to have accepted the endorsement for presidents of UPND on the basis that he was Tonga. Because at personal level, I feel, if you come to me and say you're going to be president of Patriotic Front because you are Tonga speaking, I will consider it an insult. If all you see in me is my tribe and not my capability, your argument for me to ascend to a particular position is because I speak a particular language or from a particular tribe is an insult to me. I expected him to react, but he was swimming.
He embraced it.
And embraced it. And that was a disappointment for me. I discounted him. Fast forward, I said, maybe it was circumstances. After it wasn't him talking, it was Sejani, it was Natara and all these people, and maybe whatever. Then I came to discover clearly that he's a puppet of the West. I may not discuss details, but I happen to be privileged into some discussions with Nevers Mumba, Mugabe Lungu and others, where the Oppenheimers and others were proposing things which...
The Oppenheimers who support Brent's Foundation.
Brent's Foundation, they were here under Anglo-American and so on, and I could tell that we are basically being recruited as puppets. I objected to that proposal in that meeting, and I said, this gentleman...
Who was in that meeting? You can share?
Jack Mwimbu, Hichilema himself, Nevers Mumba, you can challenge him, he will tell you. And actually nowadays I get disappointed when I see my good reverend being used in a manner he's used. One of the things that at some point inspired me to get close to Nevers Mumba, though at some point he was being mischievous to suggest that he's my political father and so on. I mean, I was involved in politics before him. But as it were, when somebody's older, you respect him in terms of being a reverend and so on. You can't be, on the street arguing with them. Let him have their day, but I'm sure the truth is known. But the way he's parroting nowadays, I really feel sorry for him. Because among the people that I was very close and intimate with over the political life of this country is Nevers Mumba. To hear what he's saying about HH today, I am saying to myself, what is the definition of hypocrisy? If this is not the ultimate grade A hypocrisy. Because Nevers Mumba would tell us this guy is deep in what he, quote unquote, would consider unchristian. I'm just being polite. Yeah. Today, to try and sanitize Hakainde Hichilema by Nevers Mumba, I'm shocked. But I think this discussion, I would rather have it with him personally in the vestry or confession chamber, the two of us, so that we can face God, the two of us, because we know each other. I know about opportunism on my elder brother, Dr. Nevers Mumba, but I think he has gone too far. In that meeting, challenge Mugabe Lungu. Bring him here, he will tell you. I challenge Mbula Kulima. Bring him here, he will tell you. I challenge Jack Mumbo. Bring him here, he will tell you. I challenge, of course, Hakainde Hichilema is a liar. Because this is a man who can boldly tell you in your face. Where was this meeting? No, it was in South Africa. Okay. At some Oppenheimer private island and all that. We were flown there and we had those discussions. So I realized this is a puppet. Further on, the nail in the coffin came during the dialogue process. And today, I'm shocked. Which dialogue process? Just put our viewers in context. There was a dialogue process that was initiated after the 2016 presidential elections. Remember that there was which now is being used to try and harass the judiciary and so on. the UPND didn't have any justification for challenging the election of 2016. What they opted to do in court was to raise preliminary issue after preliminary issue until the 14 days was exhausted. They never went to the substance of the matter. Even when the court tried to guide them, what you are coming here for is to challenge the election. These preliminary issues you are raising, no, the speaker should be the one to take over. They went all around until the 14 days because they were attempting, this is basically, legal warfare, if you like, hoping that they can create a crisis. When the court came and said, unfortunately, we are operating within a straitjacket of 14 days, therefore we cannot proceed, the matter has terminated. That's how they went to the Judicial Conference Authority to try and, complain against these people. That's another subject. After the 2016, the strategy for the UPND was to try and create unrest in this country. So they started crying on mountain tops. We need a dialogue process because we are pushing an agenda for a government of national unity. The Commonwealth must come and so on. Some of us, we saw through that narrative. We were in opposition. I belonged to MMD at the time. We told our colleagues in government, the PF, that this is a scheme. And first of all, we should be embarrassed as a country that will be inviting foreigners to come and whip us into reasoning, to come to the table to discuss simple issues like legal reforms, constitutional reforms, and so on. Don't we have competent people to deal with this matter here in Zambia? The Commonwealth sent a gentleman by the name of Professor Gambari, who used to be Minister of Foreign Affairs in Nigeria, and then he went and started working for the Commonwealth. When he came to try and engage us, I was one of them who asked him, originally you are from Nigeria, and you used to be Foreign Affairs Minister. In Nigeria there is Boko Haram and all these things. Have you been able to resolve those issues? Those issues are deeper than us differing with Mr. Hichilema. And you have come to try and conduct the dialogue process. Why don't you go back to Nigeria and resolve your issues so that then you can leave us to deal with this impasse between the opposition and the government in a homegrown, dialogue process. From then on came the discussion around a homegrown dialogue process, which led to ZCID picking it up, because ZCID is a platform for political parties to be able to dialogue among themselves if there are issues between and among ourselves. And that culminated into us having a national stakeholders summit that was held in Lusaka. From then on, we went to Siavonga as political parties with representation in Parliament and what they call PP, political parties without representation in Parliament. Okay? When we met in Siavonga, I raised a question also in Siavonga. I said, Mulambo Aimbe, you Bean, Dr. Bean, and another person that was there, how come the Secretary General, that time it was Katuka, is not in this meeting? PF is represented by Davis Muina and Mumbipiri. You have come as just officers of UPND. We appreciate as a lawyer in the name of Aimbe. But do you have the full mandate of the party? Because UPND have a tendency of sending junior officers who they can easily, disown when it is convenient for them. They assured us in Siavonga that they were part of this and they had the blessing of the president and the entire party to belong whatever. So when we, completed the deliberations, in Siavonga, we said the political party that has a tendency of changing goalposts is the UPND. So we entrusted Mulambo Aimbe, who is now Foreign Affairs Minister, used to be Justice Minister, with the responsibility of drafting the communique with his friend, Dr. Bean, who is, I think, commissioner of one of these civil servants commission or whatever. Is it teaching or something? Not teaching, but I think civil service commission or something like that. So we gave them the responsibility. They came up with the communique with 4 thematic areas. And they announced to the Zambian people. 2 days later, to the shock of everybody, the very people who drafted the communique disowned their own communique. No, as UPND, we are not comfortable with the resolutions. As we want a chair who is the Commonwealth and so on. We said, no. The chair we have chosen, either the church or prominent person, or we can choose. We are here to discuss. So it became an issue on who's going to chair the dialogue.
I'm glad that you were involved extensively in that dialogue process. I think that ended up, in Bill 10.
Now, I want you to let me land a bit. So in the process of exchanges, we went to LAS to go and discuss the impasse created by UPND. In this case, we said we want President Hakainde to be present at LAS. And for me, I said, this is a person who is aspiring to be president. These are people, a group of people who want to govern this country. We are testing their commitment to the rule of law and commitment to agreements. We sat at LAS. In that meeting, I was among those who proposed that I think there has been too many changing of goalposts. So this meeting must be recorded. So we ended up putting a recorder at the center of the conversation. And we challenged each other. What has been a problem? The chair, but the thematic areas, do you have a problem, UPND? No, we are okay with thematic areas. Ask Sean Tembo. Sean Tembo was in an alliance with the UPND at the time. And in that meeting, we even appointed Sakuba Scotta and Charles Mirupi as co-chairs for both the opposition and the ruling. Sakuba Scotta was nominated by ourselves. Charles Mirupi was nominated by UPND and the alliance. We recorded the whole conversation. At the end, after we agreed and everything was okay and the document was prepared to present to the church so that they can chair the dialogue process, went through. There's Sean Tembo and others who came. There was even the late, what was his name, that fellow? Some funny guy, Lukuku.
Oh, James Lukuku.
No, yeah. James Lukuku, who was part of the so-called alliance with Mr. Hakainde Hichilema. So we recorded everything. We even gave Mr. Hakainde Hichilema a chance to give the closing remarks in his deep voice, typical of a Tonga, just like myself. This is a very good meeting. You know, if we can operate like this, there will be no problems. Now I think we are going to serve the Zambian people with a new constitution based on these thematic areas. We have agreed, and the two colleagues will present this to the church. Unknown to us, we are going to sleep. He gave a document to Sean Tembo to go in the night to present to the church with a message that the church, by the time Sakuiba and Charles Mirupi gets to the church, they should reject that proposal. And the church, as it were, out of their innocence, because they don't play politics like ourselves. When Sakuiba Scott and Charles Mirupi went to the church in the following day in the afternoon at an appointed time, the church had that document to say, sorry, one of you brought this document in the night, Mr. Sean Tembo, from the alliance of UPND. And we have these concerns and we reject this proposal to create a stalemate. So Sakuiba Scott and Charles Mirupi could not present anything because the integrity of the process was soiled or dented by that misconduct. So we called for a meeting at Pamo's Hotel. In that meeting, ask Sylvia Marcel, GBM, who they have jailed, he was vice president to Hakainde Hichilema. Ask Edith Nawakwe, ask Davis Mwina, myself, and others, Brian Mundubire, and others. We went to Pamos. How did we end up in this situation, Mr. President? Then Hakainde Hichilema started refusing that he did not commit to any of the things we agreed the previous day. Imagine. So I raised my hand. I said, no, Mr. President, I think let's not discuss further. There is a recording to the conversation. So I called the secretary of the CID. Can you bring the recording? Hakainde Hichilema says, if you play that recording, me, I'm walking out of this. He was not even willing to own up to his own words. So I applaud President Edgar Chagalungu with the proposal now being made by the Oasis Forum for a dialogue process, Aka in the Hichilema needs to have, Edgar Chakalungu needs to have eyes in front, eyes at the back, because they are dealing with a leader and a grouping that are deceitful and cannot own up to their words. Aka in the Hichilema, when he promises you something, if he says good morning, you have to check your watch, because he may not mean what he's saying. That is the reason why people may think that I'm personal, because leadership at a level of presidents also connotes examining the character of a person, because the Bible says a king governs out of the skillfulness of their hands and the integrity of their hearts. It is important to look at the character of a person, because the embodiment of that office is usually influenced by the character of the person. That's why we seem to be personal, because a president needs to be scrutinized even at personal level.
Oh, very strong words, but very wonderful. I was asking, now that you had participated in the dialogue process, do we still need dialogue? What are the issues?
I think, for me, dialogue, it should be one of the critical lifeline of a nation. We should be able to talk. We should be able to engage. But I think there are two fundamentals that must always be in place. Those who decide to initiate a dialogue process must themselves equip themselves with the issues at hand. You can't just wake up and say, we want to initiate a dialogue process. On what basis? And I remember one time pastors and apostles and whatever priests coming to President Lungu, and I happened to have been there. And they were saying to President Lungu, I think it's important that we initiate a dialogue process between you and President Aka in the Hichilema. And they were very passionate, saying, imagine, Mr. President, if you are just seen tomorrow shaking hands with Aka in the Hichilema, it will go a wrong way. Shaking hands. Then when we asked them, do you really even understand the fundamental issues that needs to be addressed in your proposed dialogue process? They were blank. So I would propose, in principle, yes, dialogue is necessary, it's important, but the issues must first of all be identified and understood by those who want to preside over the dialogue process. Because then you are going to hold accountable, the parties accountable to the issues that you want to address. If those issues are not identified, it is just a sham. You are just basically trying to do a PR stunt which will not resolve the issues. Even at personal level, if there is a difference between a husband and a wife, you can't call people husband and wife, iseni kuno tuchite turande paadi asiachu pochenu mkwai, imine kunta shikata nama boko. And then, a good couple. This is very nice. You have resolved nothing. You have to go to the root of the issues. President Lungu was wise to respond. Colleagues, I'm ready to discuss with you. But there are fundamental issues that all of us are alive to. Are you telling me Oasis Forum, the church, and other people don't know that UPND sponsored a clique of individuals within Patriotic Front to try and destroy PF? Are we telling us that Zambians are not aware that the police were forced to stay throughout the night to change office bearers so that they can be able to impose the leadership? Are you telling us that the other people are not living in the same environment you are living in, where the president last week, he took some MPs in Northwestern Province, including GBM's daughter, and people can't read through that he was using GBM's daughter to try and justify, create a situation that justifies his incarceration of GBM? Get the daughter to go and make public pronouncement of endorsement of him, while he knew that GBM was going to be jailed the following day? What kind of hypocrisy are we ready to? What level are we able to tolerate this kind of arrangement? He, the president, was coming out of the podium, going to talk to his ADC, telling him to go and tell Jonathan Daka, let him introduce himself as the vice president of Patriotic Front. The ADC the first time didn't get the message. He went and talked to Jonathan Daka. He was speaking and he didn't say it. The president still went down to go and remind the ADC that tell the guy to say he's vice president of Patriotic Front. Are you telling us the church doesn't see that? And you want to say let's go for a dialogue without, first of all, streamlining or defining the issues that needs to be addressed? The grievance of Edgar Chakalungu, your grievance, my grievance, the grievance of Patriotic Front is that the UPND, Misaka in Hichilema, has attempted, though failed, to destroy PF. The only thing we want is that Mao Sampa has done nothing. He has not even made any dent in terms of the unity of the party. We just want the registrar of society to correct things. That's all. So that our democracy in this country thrive. If Hakainde Hichilema did not temper with the opposition, did not gag members of parliament in parliament from speaking, possibly he would have performed better. Remember Mwanawasa, what did he say after he was threatened with the possibility of Michael Sata actually dying? He came to confess that he was afraid that had Michael Sata died, possibly that was going to be his end of his good record of performance. Because the more Michael Sata criticized him, the more he performed. This president is a coward because he doesn't want to be criticized. And I want to repeat again, Mugandu is a coward. He can't face criticism in his face. He's a coward. Bold men and strong leaders live comfortably in the midst of checks and balances and criticism. For me, I've proved in the many times that I've been arrested that my elder brother, Hakainde Hichilema, is a coward with a spaghetti spine.
Wonderful. No, in Bemba we say, Infumitukwa kumbali. Leaders, kings, should understand that people will criticize them. In fact, the term used, itukwa kumbali, means the king will be insulted, you know, kumbali yamushi, away from the royal palace. The hallmark, for example, of good leadership like that of President Frederick Chiluba was his ability to sustain very, very strong criticism, some of it very personal, some of it very insulting. They would go even to his height, they would go to his family. He never arrested those people. He allowed criticism. And the issue you've given of President Mwanawasa, who they could even call cabbage because of his accident, and they alleged that he had, mental degradation because of the accident. But he embraced the criticism and joked about it. You cannot joke with the Hakainde Hichilema. You send the police every day. And Honorable Nakacinda, you've displayed some form of bravery that is rare in our country. Despite the many arrests, despite the humiliation you've gone through, the long and prolonged detention, you still speak like you've never even faced any arrest. I think our legacy of our politics will judge you very fairly. We need to, what is the state of the Patriotic Front and where should it go? And I want to transition to the major decision that the party made regarding.
Actually, many people try to call him to order, that as a reverend you can't undertake the activism you're undertaking. Today, in America, even when he never became president, he died just in the wilderness preaching the message of equality. There is a Martin Luther King Jr. Day celebrated. Nelson Mandela at some point was called a terrorist, jailed for 27 years. But because he had gathered courage to challenge the status quo, even to a point where his life was threatened with him being sentenced to death, he made pronouncements to the effect that equality, racism, and all these ugly manifestations by the apartheid regime are not tried. Over time, today he is celebrated. Back home, the Kapwepwes of this world, the Kaundas of this world, the Chilubas of this world. Aka, the one that you hosted a few days ago, the bravery he showed in the late 80s and in the 1990s to convene a meeting of the like-minded to push for the introduction of multi-party democracy was not an easy undertaking. It was at the back of a threat for their lives and their liberties. Actually, if you ask Aka, he will tell you, when he's extended invitations to some of the prominent people who were assumed to be brave and strong, for that meeting they were afraid to accept the invitation. But what they did was that they replied to the invitation by saying to Aka, we are not aware of what the agenda is. Please, can you tell us what the agenda is? So that if the system went and arrested them, they will produce their reply and say they didn't know what the agenda was. But Aka was brave enough to still proceed. What am I saying? It has to take brave Zambians to challenge the status quo. What is going on is wrong. It should not be condoned by anybody. What is happening to the judiciary is wrong. I was convicted for exposing the interference of the executive in the judiciary. Am I not justified today? But with what is happening? Now the ugly head of what we exposed in 2021 is fully manifest. We are saying the parliament is gone. How many times was I summoned at parliament and taken to court for it? Am I not justified today? The seditious practice that have been slapped with several times, I would definitely can tell you, one day be justified. It has to take what I call rebels with a cause to change society for the better. If you succumb and you don't want to rebel against the wrongs perpetuated by dictators, by tyrants, and end up on the wrong side of these dictators, they can never be changed. I'm just hoping that God will grant me the grace to still be alive, to see the change against the trajectory that Misaka and Hichilema is pushing. Because after his 5 years tenure, if we miss the opportunity to get him out of office in 2026, the damage will be too deep, too grave, and too complicated to correct after another 5 years. And I'm appealing to the Zambian people. This is not a joke. This is not just mere politicking. This is an appeal. Rise up wherever you are. At least contribute the bit you can to correct the wrong that will eventually affect our children and our children's children in the long time to come. Rebels with a cause are never there to cause problems in a nation. Actually, they are patriots who want things to be done correctly. Coming to the party, the status of the party, I can tell you that outside the attempt by UPND, which has failed, yes, the UPND now have moved their guns and effort to try and, harass our president, President Edgar Chagarungu, who is also 60th Republican president. They have harassed his family, harassed his wife, and the idea of him coming back to active politics and possibly contesting 2026 gives Misaka and Hichilema and the UPND sleepless nights. Because clearly the Zambian people have made comparisons, compare and contrast, and they have come to a conclusion that the UPND and Misaka and Hichilema are a failed project. And therefore, with all the mistakes you can talk about Edgar Chagarungu, UPND have done a fantastic job to make him look like a saint. And Zambians are saying, Arewerera. That slogan haunts Mr. Hakainde Hichilema to the core. And they want to brutalize, destroy anything, everything, just for purposes of trying to block Edgar Chagarungu from standing. They are even willing to tamper with the trust and confidence that Zambian people have always had in the judiciary to just push that agenda. And they were saying to Mr. Hakainde, stop it. Leave the judiciary alone. Leave the judiciary alone. And I appeal to everybody in the judiciary and otherwise. There is a way in which Mr. Hakainde Hichilema, if he just woke up from slumber, he can deal with his political opponent. And the simplest way to deal with the political opponent is just perform. Just score 2, 3 goals, fantastic goals like Maradona would score. Just score on the minimum meal price. Just score on fuel price. Just score and deliver the inputs to the farmers. Just score 1 or 2 so that you can feed into your appetite for boasting. You are good at it. It's just that now you are boasting and bragging over nothing. And the fact that you are good at boasting, I can just imagine how you would burst into braggadocious, wit and competence if you scored just 2 goals. You would have dealt with the opposition, not abusing institutions of governance and throwing through the window the rule of law. That we must not accept as Zambians. Outside harassing President Lungu, they are attempting to deal with every opposition political party and political leaders, whether it is Citizens First Kalava, whether it is the Socialist Party, Fred Membe, whether it is, Dan Pule, whether it is Edith Nawakwi, whether it is Savoy Mboela, whether it is KBF, whether it is, name them. They are all facing the same wrath. But as the largest political party, we are saying to our colleagues, the only way we can be able to correct what is going on is to have a unified voice. Of course, we got involved in an alliance called UCA, and as PF, we noticed that there's need for some definition on how we engage in alliances and how we relate with our friends. And 2 or 3 weeks ago, we met a central committee and deliberated on these issues and adopted or appointed an ad hoc committee which went to interrogate the issue of alliances. I think the ad hoc committee was thorough, studied both abroad and local alliances that have been formed and the fundamentals that govern those alliances. Historically, I think in the report we got to read about the alliance between UNIP and ANC for independence to be attained, and then further on other developments in the country, including studying the alliance between UPND, UNIP, and FDD as a case study to see how it worked, so that as a party, as we engage our friends, we can have a very clear, defined, way of relating. And I think we are, as we engage our colleagues, the UCA, those who have knocked at our doors like Tonse today, those who have made pronouncements like People's Pact, we are yet to also get the Zambia We Want and others on board so that we can be able to have this conversation. But that is all done in good faith, in the interest of the nation, motivated by patriotism, that I think there's something that needs to be corrected. And that which needs to be corrected needs everybody to put aside their personal or narrow interests and look at national interests for us to push an agenda for the country. Mr. Hakainde Hichilema, the UPND, are an enemy of the Republic of Zambia, and we need to show them the door.
What will happen in 2026 if you are characterizing President Hakainde Hichilema as a dictator who's tampering with institutions? Won't he attempt to retain power even if he's lost elections? What is the opposition doing about that?
You see, that is clearly the agenda of Mr. Hakainde Hichilema. Clearly, that is his agenda. And look at how the appointments he has made at ECZ of UPND cadres. Madam Zanomis is a UPND member. She was in UPND Ligaria. We have Chipenzi, who even attempted to run in Chirundu as a member of parliament on UPND ticket. And we also know what role he played in the 2021 elections and gears and all those things. The only ray of hope, the light that shines, is the fact that the will of the Zambian people has always proven to be stronger than any form of Mingarato. Mr. Dr. Kaunda was very confident that he will play, but he lost. MMD, the party to which I belonged at some point, was very confident in 2011 that they had everything under control and they would win, but it didn't happen. Even Patriotic Front, I was telling one young youth leader in the UPND this afternoon when he waylaid me at some mall. I was telling him that the confidence with which you are exerting that you're going to win cannot even compare to that of Patriotic Front. But we lost. I am very sure that regardless of the registration processes, the shenanigans to tamper with the system, the will of the Zambian people, when Zambians rise, especially when it is time to vote, they look like they were born from one mother, because it's in unison across the country, and they also have the capability to defend their vote. The real answer is to make sure that the vote is defended. We know that they are registering in a discriminatory manner voters concentrating in the Zambezi region. But Misaka and Hichilema has missed the mark. The Gen Z don't know tribe. My sons, I have 3 sons. My sons, when you talk to them about the Mutonga, they don't hear those things. Because first of all, they are confused in the sense that intermarriages have moved to the 3rd, 4th generation. So they are connected to the entire country. So they can't associate with the Tonga alone, because along the way, someone, or they are associated also with a Bemba, with an Easterner. So the trajectory of wanting to push a tribal tag is ancient. And Daka Hichilema is not such an old man. This guy is almost as old as our country. He is expected to perform much better, to behave as if he is 100 years old, talking about tribe and making decisions inclined towards tribe, is very unfortunate. I know he doesn't like it, but I'm telling him as a Tonga-speaking person, Wajirubi ya mudada, even when you want to favor your tribesmen, there's a way you do it. You don't do it as blatantly as he has done it. No. There's a way you can take care of your relatives. There's a way you can take care of your tribesmen. But you need, as president, to espouse genuinely with the deliberate effort to unite this country by getting everybody feeling they are part of the governance system of this country. That's what Kaunda did. That's what Chiluba did. Do you know that Chiluba's favorite people, we knew that Ben Mwinga was one of his favorite persons. We knew that Vincent Malambo, who today is a great disappointment to everybody. Me, I didn't expect that Uncle Malambo could behave the way he's behaving. Sorry, I'm saying it openly, but he has disappointed me. One of the people that actually, when I mention his name, my tummy turns, that has disappointed me, is Mumba Madida. He's yet to prove me wrong. When he was appointed, we were among those who were whispering and announcing that, I think this guy may just surprise us with the choice of people he has appointed. So far with what has happened to the judiciary, and Mumba Madida is quiet. I don't know this Mumba Madida, but the one I know, I'm yet to see him manifest. I'm yet to see him manifest, and I'm praying and waiting for him to manifest. Same applies to his deputy, that Mike Musonda. I was privileged to have been in the Senate committee where we are scrutinizing his nomination. His CV, his background. Yes, he may have had some connection over Lima Bank with the president, but the level of objectivity the man has exhibited in his career, I don't expect the rot happening in the judiciary to be undertaken under their watch. I'm yet to wake up from this dream. I think I'm dreaming. And I hope that after this conversation, Ms. Ambassador Mwamba, you will pinch me and get me to wake up.
No, indeed, Zambia at 60. We have 60 years as a country. We are celebrating a Diamond Jubilee. And we appear to be at the worst, especially this year, where we have, the worst load shedding, the worst crisis in literally everything. The cost of living crisis, look at the prices of essential goods and services. Then there's fracture with our national unity, with the issues that you've raised. Where do you hope? Because I think we could have reached the bottom. We need to begin to rise to where we aspire as a people.
Unfortunately, because the president doesn't realize that we are there, to cure is a problem. If I have a terminal disease and I'm in denial, you can't help me. You get a point. He makes emotional pronouncement. I don't think Misaka in the Hichilema is the type of a leader that sits to reflect, read, and sit to just listen to others, and possibly even demand for them to be raw with him. Just tell me. That's what a leader is expected. President Chiluba, I must confess, I have been very close with leaders. I think one of them that I was close to outside Emerson Mnangagwa, I was a kid, and he taught me how to drive, Another person that really I attribute with great honor to have influenced me was Stanford Flazo. But later on, it was President Chiluba. Of course, in the later years, I interacted with Dr. Chiluba. It's not everything that was wrong. The guy influenced me in many ways, and also some level of exposure. Later on, I worked with, of course, before Dr. Chiluba, I worked with Mwanawasa briefly, then remotely with Rupia Banda, then Nevers Mumba, then I worked with Mtati. And every person you associate with have a way in which they influence you in one or the other. And I worked with President Edgar Chagwa Lungu. And I can tell you that with Chiluba, there were days that he would just call you. And you are shivering under your coat. But he's saying, and when you try to, patronize him, say, no, that's not what I want to hear. Just tell me, what's going on? Then you disclose that maybe in the night, he had gone to Kaunda Square to some ward officials where he went and learnt a few things which he felt you're not telling him. So he then tells you, and you people, I invite you here, you don't tell me the truth. And if you have an idea of the subject, you obviously, you begin to express and tell him. And you will listen, jot down, without any condemnation, without any justification. And that's how come Dr. Chiluba's strength was that when there was a debate going on, he would take a month, 2 months, 3 months without responding. And people would be wondering, but the president is not saying anything. But he has gone to Kitwe in Usakire. He has gone in Chimwemwe. He has gone to Ndola in Chifubu. He has gone in Maramba. He has gone to Mazabuka somewhere in Ishuga. He has gone to Chipata in Navutika. Somehow you find his way. When Dr. Chiluba comes to speak, he will speak the language that resonates with the grassroots. But Twaganjirwe, Badana, any little statement, you also have in State House, do you know that there is what they call a Monze corner? There is what they call a Monze corner, where my relatives, they behave as if they are in the village, but they go Monze, Umasabe, where they type. Look at the Watchdog, Core Square, and all those. That is the thinking of State House. Now, when you read those things, it tells you the level of primitivity and naivety of the house where Mr. Hichilema operates from, called State House. Coupled with the fact that white people under the Tony Blair, which he himself is boasting that I knew them before I even formed government, he is basically confirming that he's a puppet. The Greg Mills have also established a unit to advise him. There is no chance to redeem the situation. The only way to redeem the situation is that we have to prepare ourselves for the vote. But we should not allow Mr. Hichilema to be able to manipulate and collapse institutions of government. We have to salvage ECZ. We have to salvage the judiciary. We have to salvage parliament. And members of parliament, the person that we're talking about being involved in an accident, our good brother and elder brother Chimba Kambwe, when he was in opposition between 2011, he alone could actually take up the government through parliament. Coupled with that gentleman, Savior, Chishimba, they would go to parliament to go and, picket. So I can only encourage colleagues in parliament. Press briefings are good, but I think we need to up the game and fight for the Zambian people. There is a cause, and there is truly a cause. Let's all rise up and do something about it.
Thank you very much. Dear viewers, before I invite Honorable Nakacinda to say his last words, before we started this program, or at the start of the program, I announced that we, as a family, the Patriotic Front, we have a bereavement. Honorable Chimba Kambwili's two brothers, we lost them in a terrible fatal accident that occurred at Luwushi, near Kasama in Kasama district. The two persons that are feared dead are Honorable Chimba Kambwili's brothers. He himself, when we were coming to broadcast, was also okay. He had survived the accident, but he was in a lot of pain. And they had taken him to Munkonge mini hospital. But we have hoped that both the medical staff and our people in Kasama could quickly move him to Kasama General Hospital. His lawyer also survived, and his driver survived. We have wished for their safety and for their prayers. And again, our sincere condolences to his two brothers that have died. Honorable Kambwili was rushing into Kasama. You are aware that his appeal case was being heard in the last few weeks, and it was scheduled tomorrow on 16th October, Wednesday. And so he was going into Kasama from Luansha to attend to his court case when the terrible accident occurred. And the accident occurred near Kasama when they had nearly arrived. We are yet to get more details, but what we know is that he survived the accident. We personally spoke to him before we came into this program, and he was in a lot of pain, but he was grieving already because he had confirmed that he had lost his two brothers in that accident. So we continue to pray for Honorable Kambwili, his lawyer. And so as a family of the Patriotic Front, we are mourning. We are hosting Honorable Raphael Nakacinda. We've had 2 fantastic hours with him. Honorable Nakacinda, what are your last words?
Well, my last words, first of all, is to strengthen and encourage President Edgar Chagolongo to remain resilient and steer the ship. Zambians are basically looking up to him, and he must be assured of our total support, and in that we will stand with him and we'll do our best with him to provide leadership in opposition and a clear alternative. And I want to assure the Zambian people, Yes, we have President Lungu, our flag bearer and leader. But the good thing is that he has also done a fantastic job in raising a cadre of leaders within PF and in other spheres. You should never be worried. There will never be a chance when you are stranded in terms of leadership. 2026, we are definitely going to get into government and get rid of this burden that you are, suffering to conclude or possibly, imagine how you're going to get rid of.
I just want to support you there on the level and type of leadership the Patriotic Front has, reservoir of leaders. Maybe when I was an ambassador, I was PS, I dealt with government and government officials at many levels. But I'm always amazed at the depth and knowledge of the leaders that the Patriotic Front have. Whether they're in committees or whether they're in Central Committee or our leaders in Parliament.
Right.
Patriotic Front clearly has a huge reservoir of leadership. And that's a big, big resource.
Right.
And that 3 years on, and despite the relentless attack from President Hakainde Hichilema, to still have structures intact, the 116 district, all the 156 constituencies, and mostly even in Parliament, other than a few, you can see that Parliament is still intact. The leadership is almost intact, yet, the party has suffered this assault. And those that they attempted to buy and give certificates and think that they could go away with the party, I think the disappointment has been to the sponsors, because then they're surprised that they can't marshal anyone around themselves. So yeah, the Patriotic Front just needs reorganizing. You really have the depth and reservoir of leadership that I personally get surprised every day when I am interacting with them.
No, thanks very much, Ambassador, and I must commend you that you are doing a fantastic job on the conversation and the podcast. You have brought eminent personalities, and I think their contribution and discourse keeps on shaping not only the narrative but also feeding into what is expected of this country to be today and tomorrow. Keep up the good work. That's why we call you the machinery.
Yes, indeed. He likes calling me the machinery. The machinery is that you're all encompassing. Everything is in you.
Indeed.
I take that with grace. Thank you very much.